Franco for having me here in Ottawa. It's really nice to be here. It's a great space, and it's great to see everybody organizing here because in Montreal, there's a lot of people making tech art and doing this sort of stuff, but the efforts to organize have sort of fallen short. There's like a mailing list that has one post, and there's a Slack channel that has like 5 members, and it's mainly just me posting, being like, please come to this. So tonight I just mainly want to talk about a bunch of stuff actually. There's sort of my creative process, there's some projects that I've made in the past, there's some projects that I'm going to make in the future, there's sort of like a lot of information on how to get started on this sort of thing, and a bunch of other stuff, so I hope you really enjoy it. And there's a link here, tiny.cc/ConnorBell.Ottawa. It has all of the links for everything inside of a Google Doc, so don't worry about like trying to take a picture of a slide if there's like a URL you really want in it. I'll also show that URL at the end. So yeah, I'll begin on how I got started. I mainly, in high school, got a PlayStation Portable and played the heck out of it for a really long time, and was browsing some video game forums for like, I'm sure like cheat codes or something for Grand Theft Auto. And somebody posted a video of them running Super Mario World on their PlayStation Portable, and I was like, what the heck is this? Not only is a game system running a different game system, it's a game system running something that like Sony didn't allow them to. Like, you can't go to Walmart and buy Super Mario World for a PlayStation Portable. So I got really interested into like how that was possible to run a machine on a different kind of machine, and how it was possible to run unsigned code on a PlayStation Portable. So I got into sort of hacking the scene with that, and got interested in programming with that. I started learning the C programming language with OpenGL, and started coding my own video games, and met some cool mentors who helped me along the way. I decided to go to Dalhousie for computer science, but I mainly spent my time programming my own video games and apps during class because I was already self-taught for a lot of things. I ended up going to a conference that had this tech artist speaker named Kyle McDonald do a talk, who introduced me to both art and tech art, because I grew up in a very small town. I knew that art existed, but like, art being political and like making statements about like anonymity and privacy and like making commentary on those sorts of subjects was just like, wow, that's totally new to me. And like, wow, I can use code to make representations and ideas of these things. And this is actually not a very political piece, at least to my awareness, but it's just some projection mapping on a bunch of disco balls. Another big inspiration of mine is an experimental art game named Bubsy 3D. And it just sort of taught me that video games can be more than just Grand Theft Auto or Halo or something like that, or with guns, but it can be more of an experience that's like avant-garde, where you can go and talk to frogs and go to art exhibits. Another big inspiration of mine was the demo scene. And if you've never heard of the demo scene before, it's this super interesting computer subculture that creates procedural graphics and audio and presents them at what's called demo parties. And they try to make them in executable sizes that are under a certain file size constraint. So this right here is a 4 kilobyte demo. So there's less than 4,000 bytes of code to generate this entire fractal device. And I draw a lot of inspirations from the demo scene in my current work, which I'll show a bit later, but a lot of the same algorithms that they use, I use a lot in my work as well. I did get started, however, though, just making Three.js sketches. It's just a library for the web that uses WebGL under the hood. I just started mimicking a lot of artists that I saw on Tumblr, just generating like tile sheets, weird geometric stuff that's all procedural. I made some animations and stuff like that to sort of to help me learn about the stuff that I was like lost in math class about. Like actually implementing trigonometric functions gave me like a way better understanding of it than the sort of like black box way that it was taught to me in school. The first big project I worked on though during my undergrad was an application called Glitch Wizard. It was an application where you can create your own artwork, you import images or videos or GIFs, and you can just sort of apply a bunch of different effects to them and make these compositions. So you apply an effect to the first frame and the second frame, and then you show the process of the cumulative glitching. So you can glitch every image that has been glitched, and you show the process in the animation. This is the trailer. I blame the success of the app on the trailer.
Yo, find anything rad?
Nah, man. These filters are whack.
Sounds like you need Glitch Wizard.
That trailer. I'm super happy about it. It also has great SEO, search engine optimization for it. It's like you go Google like glitch app, and it's like, oh, that's Glitch Wizard. It's like it's a really catchy name. It's a really good brand. So yeah, the Glitch Wizard is actually where I first learned to make shaders, which is the same as the type of program that I use now in my everyday work. And I had to learn them because the original implementation of all the glitches in Glitch Wizard were very authentic glitches where you would remove data from an image and then reinterpret it, and the effects would be these like distorted images. And Apple, they released iOS 8. I was running a beta at the time, so this is the only way I found this out. And they totally changed the way that they decoded images, so our entire app, every effect you would apply would just show up like a black image. So I had to learn shaders, which is a program that runs in the graphics card, in order to replicate these effects in a different way. So that was a bit of a funny crunch time. But I learned a new valuable skill, and then the follow-up app to Glitch Wizard was entirely shader-based, and it was a live video processing app called Moonshadow, and it chroma keyed different generative visual effects to different colors of the image, and you can have like several layers on them and stuff. This is the same skate park that the Glitch Wizard trailer was made in. But yeah, I invited a bunch of collaborators to work on this with me, and they wrote like different effects. And the whole project was free and open source. And so that was really fun. But the main thing I've been working on for the past 4 years have been just these procedural looping animations. I really like GIFs as a tool because before this, I found myself, there was a few false starts on very big, ambitious projects where I just found myself over-scoping them and just either losing interest or time or energy in making them. So I thought GIFs were a really good format to focus on a specific idea and just sort of like have a sketchbook. So just like focus on an idea of animation or color or composition or mathematics and just really have like isolated experiments where you can share it really easily, because like GIFs, it's like you're just scrolling through social media and it's like they just play automatically. So it's like you don't need to go download an executable or like run a program in order to like experience this idea or animation. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about like a little bit of my creative process in making these sort of GIFs. I find myself often just fluctuating between engineering and creative flow states, and where the engineering phase is just enabling these creative flow states by like building these like tool architectures and like reading the like research papers and stuff that sort of let me write the back end, so I can sort of be able to like improvise and do creative development on the front end side of things. It's like I'll generally like hook up the back end to control something like with a MIDI controller and be able to control the values of like a fractal, with a bunch of knobs and stuff. And there's like 8 knobs on this controller, so it's like contrast this to changing values manually in code and recompiling every time. It's just like totally night and day. So you can just like be able to like improvise and like sort of like you can even have this as a performance, just to like play with these knobs and stuff. A book I'm reading right now talks a lot about flow states. They say the flow state occurs when the challenge of the activity just slightly exceeds our skill level, so attention is continually required. And flow states are kind of universal. It's like they can happen like in programming. They happen even like during the engineering phase for me, but where you get so into doing the engineering tasks that you just like kind of get into a good flow state. But I often like to totally reserve creative development for flow states, and they're often for like they're for anything, right? It's like I kind of liken it to music, how like the engineering phase of music is learning the scales and the chords and everything behind that, and then once you have a good familiarity with them, you can begin to start improvising, making and composing your own songs. One of my most recent flow states has been making all this work that you've like been seeing on the wall and stuff, making these like generative fractal terrains. When I first made them, I was just like so fascinated by like exploring the different like parameter configurations of these. I was just like taking screenshot after screenshot of these fractal caves. I found them like super captivating, and I found it even more captivating when I like implemented this like center monolithic object that just like rotates and like smoothly blends with the fractal terrain around it. The algorithm I use for this technique is called kaleidoscopic iterative function systems. And I'm going to talk about that for a bit, sorry, but it's like really cool. Like most mathematical concepts, it's often easier to explain in 2 dimensions rather than just like jump right into the full fractal terrain. So you start with the center object here, it's just a single square, and then you duplicate it, and then you translate it, which just means move in math language, and then you rotate it and scale it, and continue doing that process all the way down. So you can see that's just all copies of itself undergoing several transformations and rotations and scales. And then the kaleidoscopic aspect of it is to mirror it on every axis, on every iteration. This is it mirrored on one axis, and then this is it mirrored on the second axis. It's a similar concept that you might be familiar with called recursion. So recursively, you could go down to each sub-level and get to the very end and draw that object. And with recursion, you would actually have to draw every single individual object, whereas with this technique, you're actually folding the space, so and repeating the space. So the object, you only have to draw the object once, and since the domain of the space is folded, you draw it into all of the folds. So it's a lot more efficient in that way. And this is a little process video I made of this concept expanded into three dimensions. It's where you make a bunch of translations of the same object, and then for one axis, you make all the rotations. And then for the second axis, rotate everything. You just animate the parameters, bring in a centerpiece. Then you start blending it with the terrain around. It starts creating this very organic feel. And then the rest is mainly just post-processing. You add a little depth of field. If you're into shaders, you can pass the depth texture in the alpha channel. It's really fun. And then you can just add a vignette, and it's like a little feedback loop. And then you have a GIF. It's that simple. And yeah, these are some various animations that I've made with this technique. I was like super happy with like the results that I was seeing. So I decided I wanted to package these up in a way that was just more than just GIFs, because GIFs are just so ephemeral that you kind of post them and like people like look at them for a day and they're like, wow, congratulations, you made a GIF. And so I decided to explore other ways to package them up and distribute them. So I began rendering VJ loops, which are all between 15 seconds and 30 seconds long. And I'm used to making GIFs that are just 3 seconds long, so this was like a big challenge for me, like 15 seconds. That's insane. So I just like try to give the feeling of exploration, like the same sort of exploration that I get when I explore the space with my MIDI controller. And they're all available for free under the Creative Commons Attribution license. I mainly just wanted like artists to be able to use my work with their work too, and it's like also a way if like someone's throwing a party, they can just kind of go and download my visuals, and they all do. So you can like put these on loop for like a while before someone notices that they're thing. I made some physical prints. They're like definitely not as nice as the ones that are here tonight, but I just went to a little store in Montreal, and they helped me out a little. And I set up a little big cartel store online that I've been meaning to set back up because I deactivated it when I went traveling. But yeah, it was pretty cool. It was just really nice to have something physical to give to friends and like give to new people that I meet and stuff like that. And generally, I just work on a screen, so it's nice to have physical things. And it's kind of fun. I've been doing some like live performances in Montreal where I just do projection visuals for different musicians, and this is one where I just controlled the parameters again from a MIDI controller just on stage. I also live coded this one too. It's out of the video, but I'm using a program where you can overlay the code on the visual that it's rendering and then edit it in real time. So there's a bit of a culture called live coding that's super interesting. And yeah, just referring back to the video I showed earlier, I'm really interested in explaining concepts at a higher level. And rather than just sort of explaining things in a very academic sense where it's all technical and mathematical, because I believe by explaining things at a high level, it's more accessible to a wider audience. And it also gives people the opportunity to ask questions if they're more interested in getting into more technical details of things. So it sort of generates this discussion, but everyone can sort of like have fun with it, you know? But yeah, often people are like, what are you using? Like, is it like Cinema 4D or like Blender or what? And it's like, I just literally use a website that lets you run shaders in the browser, and it's not hard. It's very basic. And then there's a plugin for this website where you can render PNGs from the animation that you're creating. And then from those PNGs, I wrote a little Python script to compile those into GIFs and videos for different like social media websites. Like Tumblr has like a 3 megabyte maximum. There's like Twitter with a 5, and then Giphy with 15 sort of thing. So I make it really efficient, so I don't have to like open them in Photoshop and spend all this time. It's like enabling yourself to sort of not be constrained by putting everything together in a package to share is really good for good and like sharing. It's like I wouldn't share like half as much if I didn't have this little tool. So yeah, shaders themselves basically just are little programs that run on the graphics card. The graphics card is, you might know as the GPU, contrasted to the CPU of a computer. The graphics card is mainly responsible for running all those like really good video game graphics and stuff. So they're really good at doing math, and the programs are similar to like ones that you would see in the C language. And so basically, the kind of shader that I write is called a fragment shader, which makes procedural textures. And that's actually really simple because it's just for every cell grid here, it's just a program that computes the pixel color of it. So the program runs for every cell in this grid, and then yeah, you basically make a picture out of this one single function. And everyone's like, wow, how did you get a 3D image from a 2D plane? Like, that's ridiculous. And it's with the projection matrix. So you use a projection matrix to go from every cell in the grid and project it into 3-dimensional space. And then you approximate where it intersects with the fractal that we were talking about earlier. It's really simple. Shaders are also awesome because they're engine independent. It's like everyone wants to know where to start. And I'm like, oh, you should totally use shaders because like you can use it in so many contexts and stuff. You can, like, you know, WebGL, Unity, basically anything supports shaders. And yeah, you write it once and use it in several contexts. There's a little star there because there are different shading languages, but there's like scripts to convert between them. And it's nothing like processing, where if you write something in processing and you want to port it over to Unity, it's like a whole thing, sort of. But it's a lot easier to port different shaders to things. So various contexts that I've used shaders in are on my website. I thought having a giant fractal on my homepage was a good representation of who you were dealing with when you put up my website. It's all written in a library called 3JS. I wrote a lot of shaders for a conference called FITC Web Unleashed, where they wanted intro credits to display all the names that were speaking at their conference. And my friend Cale Bradbury and I made procedural shaders for each tunnel. So everybody has their own personalized tunnel based on the characters of their name. So this works by having for each letter of the alphabet, having a corresponding line of code. And then when the program starts, for each name, you go through each letter of their name and compile a shader based on what code is represented for each letter. I've also used shaders in the client projects that I'm doing right now. They're like a social media company called Map Farm, and they wanted me to write a bunch of trippy effects for them. So I'm like, cool, that's what I do. So this technique uses like what's called a feedback loop to get this like tracer blending effect, which basically just means you blend the previous image with the current frame. So it's kind of like a motion blur technique. It's similar to pointing a video camera at a screen that is displaying itself. It sort of creates this like tunnel effect. And I use feedback loops all throughout my work. I think they're the coolest thing ever. Like these GIFs by themselves without the feedback loops would just be extremely basic and like not really much to them, but because of the effect that it has, it makes them like so much more captivating and interesting. And feedback loops are just like one module of a code that I like copy and paste around everywhere, which is something that I do a lot in my work of. I reuse so many tricks and nobody ever notices, which is great. I like wrote this little piece of code to make like extruding lines from a center point in like 2016, and like every time I have a new idea, I'm just like boom, guaranteed like new like cool GIFs that no one like recognizes. Same with this measure sponge technique. It's a type of fractal where you just subtract a bunch of cubes from an object in a certain pattern. I made it in 2016, and I just like, whatever geometry I have, I'm just like, apply this function, and then it just like looks really cool. I'm planning to start to do live GIF development on Twitch. I wrote a bunch of tools in Unity to make it so I can control a bunch of the parameters with my MIDI controller and save the presets that I configure with them so I can upload them to GitHub. So people can, after watching the broadcast, they can go to GitHub, download the preset that I made to make the GIF that they watch on the broadcast, and then like make versions of it themselves. I also just like want to start streaming because I want to start engaging with people in a very like improvisational fashion and just start like asking questions and getting better to explain things at a higher level. And it's like when people want to learn and I want to teach, it becomes this like positive feedback loop, but we're all like here because we want to, and then we're just all stoked on learning. I'm also working on a virtual reality project, trying to adapt my latest fractal work to it. This is just a video of a previous fractal experiment that I worked on. But I'm just kind of still in the engineering phase of my creative development. With this, I've been in research paper like purgatory, where basically the technique that I use to make a lot of my GIFs, it's like not very efficient in terms of like computer power. So like it's kind of hard to render it at 60 frames per second, like even in 720p. So when you're working with VR, you actually have to render the scene from both your left and your right eye. So it becomes double expensive, like right off the bat. So I'm working on this technique called stereographic reprojection, where you like render the thing once and then you reproject from each eye onto the depth map that you create. That's like way too much to get into right now, but I'll probably do some streaming of that as well on Twitch when I get around to it. But yeah, I want to talk about some opportunities that some of this creative development has like led me. Just by like publishing all my work so consistently, I get most of my clients just like discovering me on Twitter, Instagram, or something like that. My latest client now, who I like love working with, is just like a big fan of my work, and I can basically just get free creative development control. It's really nice. Some project paid for travel. I got to come here, obviously. And some people just like are having an exhibition in like Spain or the UK or something that are like, hey, can we just like display your stuff? We can't pay for travel, but you can provide documentation of it. And it's like, that's great. Like, I would love for that to happen. Like, it gets more like exposure for my work, which is good and bad, which I'll talk about in a bit. But yeah, I also get to meet a lot of people from it. Yeah, I have a lot of good people here tonight. Like, and I meet a lot of people on the internet. It's a good community, online and off. And some of the things I've learned from doing professional creative work is like, never work for exposure. I know I just said that the exposure was nice, but I just like, it's fun getting to like send someone a bunch of MP4s, and then it is to like work on a 6-month contract for like a band you really like, sort of thing, like, and then have it never be released. That may or may not have happened. Definitely always read contracts, even if it's like a follow-up contract for doing more work. Run it through a diffing tool. I swear, it's like sometimes there can be things that are inserted into like follow-up contracts that you like weren't aware of and weren't told of, and you're just like, weird. That's funny that that's there and you didn't mention it. And then also retaining rights to IP is super valuable, because both for you and the client, I think, because say you want to work on a tool that really accelerates your development during the contract, you're not incentivized yourself to build a tool, because that tool then becomes their tool and you can't ever work on it again because it's owned by them. So by granting an infinite license to use and modify the code that you give to your clients, you can then create your own development tools to make your work more efficient. And so the client gets their stuff quicker and more efficiently, and you get to reuse your stuff, and it's win-win in my opinion. But it's not exactly standard. And this is just general advice for any contract besides creative coding. I'm sure this is like very abstract contract advice. So yeah, also be careful with like fixed price, because people are like, oh, can we get like this little thing changed? It's just the color, but it turns out this color is like a huge other thing. It has to do with like the whole lighting model or something, and then you have to. It's just like a whole other thing. So fixed price is super dangerous. Yeah, so a lot of people want to know how to get started on creative coding, and I often tell them, yeah, it's all about knowing how you want to approach it. You need to know what tools and engines and languages you want to use. It's like depending on your technical background and like desire to use open source software, which is really important. Like, do you really want to commit yourself to learning a proprietary software that has like $100 a month fee? You need to ask yourself those sorts of questions. Once you figure out what you want to use, your tools, you've got to like gather lots of resources and surround yourself with like a community, both online and offline. You're already here, good job. And just try to start implementing stuff and sharing it as well. Try to set up your sharing pipeline so that you don't need to like manually do a bunch of work. Make it so your PNGs run using GIFs. I'll give you the script. It's cool. Even if you're just following a tutorial and you feel like, why am I just copying and pasting this code? It's like, I guarantee you'll find a way to make it your own. Like hook it up to a MIDI controller or something. You'll totally find parameters that the author never thought was possible. Like, the stuff that people make with Glitch Wizard is like ridiculous that they sent me. It's like, I can't even recognize it. I don't even know what effects they used in it. I'm just like, great job, like, that's yours. Like, yeah, so you can also use creative coding to teach yourself technical skills that are employable. So imagine teaching yourself to creative code. You can teach yourself a better intuition on math, like trigonometry. Is so hard unless you like develop an intuition for it. And like at the end of it, you can have yourself like an employable like portfolio with a bunch of like pretty images at the end. It's like, it's great. Getting started with tools, it's like, I'd recommend probably one of these three. I'm sure there's much more, but these are the ones that I'm familiar with. 3JS, if you're familiar with JavaScript, probably use that one. It's for the web. You can make something, you can put it on a website, you can share it really easily. There's processing, which like a lot of art installations are made from. And then there's open frameworks. Open frameworks is in C, C++, and it's really powerful. I want to learn it. I haven't had time. It looks great. If you have time, I recommend checking out open frameworks. And all of these three support shaders as well. Shaders. As for proprietary software, the two that I find really interesting right now are Unity and Touch Designer. I've never used Touch Designer before, but I keep wanting to try. I'm like tempted by the big corporate software. It looks really nice. It's all like node-based. You can just like make data flow around, and it's super nice. Anyway, those two are both really great. Unity supports like all the VR, AR stuff, so it's really easy to like make like new media installations and stuff with Unity. I'm not sure about Touch Design. The Touch Designer is more for like huge art installations, projecting on a church with like 1,200 projectors, stuff like that. And if you learn either of these, independent of if you have an education or anything, like there's like going to be a million people wanting to hire you. As for resources, the book of shaders is extremely good. Even if you don't want to learn shaders, there's an article about noise on this, which is just basically like random data. That is so valuable. It's super good. Check it out for sure. And as a reminder, there's all links at the end, so you don't need to take pictures. I mean, feel free to take pictures of that data. The Coding Train is a really good YouTube channel. Daniel Schiffman, he's very eccentric and super good at explaining things. He explains a bunch of other things too, besides creative coding, but definitely search his fractal work and his reaction to fusion stuff, because those are both really good videos. This is a textbook that I absolutely adore. It's called The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants. It's by the person who invented L systems, and it basically talks about that a lot. And it's an awesome book. It's one of those ones where you can like kind of read it, and then without giving an implementation, you can like kind of implement it yourself. I'm going to talk about some of my current inspirations right now. This is a company called Nervous System. It's run by Jessica and Jesse Rosenkratz, and they use biological algorithms to generate various sculptures, jewelry, ceramics, and this 3D printed dress. And a funny fact I know about this dress is that since 3D printers aren't shaped in a way that supports just printing out a dress as if it was being worn on somebody, they had to simulate the dress physically as if it was folded up. And then they printed it while it was folded up, and then unfolded it once it was printed. So it's kind of cool. Another favorite artist of mine is named Joshua Davis. He uses processing to create, I think, the majority of his work. Sorry about the dumb stuff. Yeah, all of his work is really cool. He uses feedback loops like quite extensively in his work, and he gets a lot of like really cool design contracts for like big commercial stuff, and what he does is export all of his geometries to SVG files, and then he imports all of those to Illustrator, so he can like sort of like speak the language of designers by like working with the tools that they use, sort of thing, which I find like really interesting. Because all this stuff is just vectors and SVG, it's just you need to learn how to convert between the different formats and stuff. This is sort of creative coding. Depends who you're talking to, but this is a math channel on YouTube that explains things intuitively and visually called 3 Blue 1 Brown. This is a collaboration he did with a person named Ben Eater, where it's actually an interactive video where you can kind of like tweak the values and kind of go back and forth between 2D, 3D, and 4D space. I find it super interesting and inspiring to sort of visualize math in a very accessible way. So I highly recommend checking that out. This procedural generation technique is called the wave function collapse algorithm. It's based off of principles of quantum physics, although it is quite accessible despite what it's based off of. But basically you start with a single square, and then that square has an adjacency map of squares that are like compatible beside it, and then from there it generates this whole map. And this image shows the 2D version of it, but there are some really beautiful examples of 3-dimensional environments that are made with this. This artist goes by the handle MX Sage, and they made extremely cool organic structures based on slime molds. There's this wonderful research paper that I linked that basically talks all about it. That's where they got the implementation from, and it's just a super cool read, and highly recommend it. And that's all I have right now. So I think we have a question period. If anyone has any questions, I would love to answer them. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming. Franco for having me, Candace Bob. It's been great. Yeah. Well, I think that Twitch itself is feels like a project because I'm building a lot of tools surrounding the workflow and development of the sort of performative aspect of live coding and stuff like that. But other than the VR project and Twitch, that's kind of currently all on my future plate. I find myself often just getting too many things on the go and then sort of having to make compromises in terms of what I can and can't work on, sort of thing. So I feel like my summer is all scoped out, but we'll see where the VR project takes me. Oftentimes when I'm working on a project, it will inspire me to do a different project or expand on it in a way that I never really had scoped out in the first place. So I generally see where projects take me. They usually, develop organically, like a slime mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. I do have a geeky computer, but a lot of them run on my MacBook Pro 2015, 14, something like that. Obviously, when I'm making renders, I will do them at a high definition, which has, and also the rendering has an overhead when you render them to a PNG, so that makes it not real time, but yeah, it's real time, sort of. Thank you. Yeah, so I haven't really dug much into open frameworks myself. I just know a lot of artists that use it, and it seems extremely powerful because I'm kind of operating off assumptions here, but I know that C++ is a very fast language, and therefore it can just sort of handle a lot more in terms of driving a lot of projectors and other interactive things. I think I think it's just faster in a lot of ways. Has a really good community around it, sort of thing. The main person behind it, maybe the main person, Zach Lieberman. He has a lot of cool AR demos that he makes with open frameworks, so it seems it's very cross-platform, which is interesting and very valuable. And so I use an editor called Atom, which is a sort of like general programming editor, which a lot of people use, not for live coding, but it has a wonderful plugin for it called Vita, which lets you run shaders like in the background of your code editor, so you can sort of edit the code on top of what's, you can edit the code that's rendering the thing that is being layered on. So when you update it, you can compile it in you can, I think it's like Control Enter, and then it compiles and then updates sort of thing. And then you can map MIDI MIDI parameters to it really easily, so you don't even need to recompile it when you're doing that stuff. You just tweak the knobs. Definitely. Yeah, I see a lot of people get stuck on like imposter syndrome. I can't really speak to it like personally that much, but my suggestion is just to sort of like share things. Just like don't have expectations for people like liking it or anything. You know, these days with social media, everything can just be like, oh, I didn't get like likes on this or anything. It's just like just get in the habit of sharing things, even if like you don't think it's good. It's just like it's great. Like it's fine. Like this is wonderful that you're sharing this and making this. People need to see that you're making this. So that's a challenge. Definitely like having the time to study this is really difficult. Like so many people like work a full-time job, and then like when they get home it's their time to work on extracurricular stuff. So often, yeah, finding the time is often a huge challenge because, especially depending on your technical background, the prerequisites you need to learn to be able to like start making things can be like quite a lot. It's like, oh, like programming 101 sort of thing. It's like, let's start there. So yeah, finding the time, I think is a big challenge, which just like having routines, I think would probably help a lot with that, because you can get in the habit of just procrastinating and be like, oh, this like isn't, maybe I'll do this someday sort of thing, and just like actually going and doing it. You can like, okay, I'm gonna do a game jam, or like the equivalent of a game jam for creative coding this weekend. I wanna experiment with this algorithm or this idea this weekend. Just try to make something.